And visually, all your films were just spectacular, by the way. They really are beautiful and beautifully shot. Like, I was just sitting last night and kind of watching them and really taking them in, and it was just really moving how you guys worked with your cinematographer. And I suppose that's my next kind of question is, you know, the marriage that's needed with your cinematographer, and this is again a question for all of you guys, is how much planning and did you have with them with regards to putting your, visually the films together?
Obviously, as filmmakers, we want it to be visually meaningful, but also captivating, and that's always been important to me. And creating something more than just what we might see, in the everyday, even though it might be an everyday world. But, I think I worked with Australia's busiest DOP in Mark Wareham. I mean, I haven't even seen him since we wrapped, and we keep saying, we've got to have dinner. He's just never in town. He's always shooting, some fantastic feature film or TV series somewhere. So I had really limited time with Mark, but the time that we had, we spent firstly talking about budget and how to make this exciting on $1 million. And for him, it was about, I don't want to be trying to do what I do with, 10 times that amount of money on $1 million. I want to do something different. I don't want a big crew. I want us to be able to be agile and move and follow the light and shoot in order or use natural light. We didn't quite get there. We then scheduled and there was no way we could shoot in order. But we certainly didn't have very many lights go up, which was really liberating and really amazing in a great location. Because it meant we could shoot scenes and just point the camera anywhere and move the camera with the actors through the space and shoot 2-minute takes, walking down hallways, disappearing into bedrooms, coming back out again, running up the stairs. Yep, we'll go up there with them. It was great. Whole action sequences where she clobbers him with the gun. We did it all in real time. So she clobbers him with the gun. She goes out to tell the taxi driver he's not getting in the taxi because he's changed his mind. We go out with her. In the meantime, the makeup team are bloodying up Vince on the ground, and by the time the camera finds him again, he's bleeding, and really, I mean, that's really fun. Yeah, it's a really fun way to approach an action scene. If you've got that location that works no matter what way you point the camera and without any lights up, you can do it. Yeah. So I suppose we had that sort of fun.
Did you always know that you wanted to work with him, or did you go through different kinds of style of cinematographers that you felt were?
Yeah. I had to think about it. Yeah. And there were a couple of names that were on the table, but Mark just responded immediately and really, really passionately about the script, and it felt like a really, really good collaboration. I mean, he brings so much energy to a set. Actors love him. He's a really important part of the film for me.
And the collaboration and bringing that kind of energy to a set it's awesome because everyone feeds off that. It's infectious.
It is infectious. Yeah. I mean, he's a great energy to have on set. But so many ideas. Mark just doesn't have one idea. He has 20, in every moment. So it's like, it's great because you're just hand picking. It's like, I love that one. But yeah, really adaptable too. He'd like, what about him? And I'm like, no, well, and he's like, okay, here's 20 more ideas about how we can do it your way. So it was really good. But I think the other really important thing that we did in preparing was to watch some films together. I kind of shortlisted. I did that process. He was off doing other films, so I shared that with him. So he was across it. But yeah, watching a couple of films together that became our sort of key references. That we would go back to. That was a really important part of it as well. Yeah. So the time that we had might have been limited, but it was really it really worked. It was a really great collaboration.
Yeah, well, it shows. It really does. And Butterfly Tree was just vibrant and bright and wonderful, and the locations that were there too. It almost felt at times like it wasn't Australia. It really was quite extraordinary. And Jason was the DOP on Butterfly Tree. Did you always know that you wanted to work with them, or did you, again, as Mairi did, had a few people on the table that had the same kind of body of work that you thought could work?
Yeah, well, I guess because the process started quite a long time before we shot. I'd shot a short that was used as a selling tool, very deliberately so, called Beetle Feeders as a go-to to what these worlds of the film would look like.
Yeah.
There was a lot of thought, a lot of planning behind creating the worlds of the film, particularly on the money, so that, you know, his fantasy world was, if I had a pyramid structure, his fantasy world was on the top as the most beautiful, safest place for him. Then underneath that was Evelyn's shop, and then underneath that was his bedroom, which was the transition world. The forest came at the same level as the shop, and then the transition world was his bedroom, and then the rest of the world was was at the bottom of the pyramid, meaning where he felt less safe, and that represented the ugly world that he wanted to escape from, which was representative of his relationship with his father. There was very much a visual structure at play that was inherent in the script itself and the worlds. And I had always wanted to make a film that didn't feel Australian in the term of dry country roads. And, you know, and I grew up in country Australia, and I've had enough of drought. You know, I've seen that stuff. And it's like, I just wanted to see a different Australia, and yet we live in this amazing country that has so much to offer in terms of our landscapes. I go, I want to utilise another landscape. And I have this magical realism world. And I mean, he has this huge insect world that very much plays a part. And you go, well, insects are in the tropical landscape. So I'm going to choose locations that not only feed into the magical realism colour palette, and then I'm going to create, you know, our go-to hero pieces, which was the florist shop, the glass house. How do we do that on a budget? And then how do I tie it all together? And then all the other locations. I found the locations and then stripped out things that didn't serve that colour scheme, the colour palette that was going to serve that world. So it was about learning to put your money where it needed to go, and then do a reductionist approach to the rest. And Jason was very much part of that process. So from Beetle Feeders, and even before that, I wanted to do graffiti light painting, but for live action. Couldn't quite pull it off in terms of like that whole opening burlesque sequence was supposed to have lots of light trails, like graffiti light painting. We couldn't make it work within the ARRI. And so we used a lot of slow-mo and phantom cameras and things like that to kind of get the same kind of effect. So Jason and I spent a lot of time, scene by scene, talking about this is what the function of the scene is, but this is the visceral experience, and this is how we're going to elevate it. Out of that, what can we do? What options have I got in terms of how will we shoot it, and how do we create that? What sort of cameras do I need? What lenses? Blah, 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 blah. All of that. So we sat down for, I think, 3 to 4 days just to go through scene by scene by scene, and we'd use a lot of reference material and images because we had to make very specific decisions. Like to go, okay, this is how we're going to create this. It's going to be like this. And just how to handle the whole glass house, the roller skating in the rain sequence. You know, that went from a stage set up in the paddock in the middle of the night with screens that were like peel-shaped screens that would have images projected on them. And then we're going, can't put Melissa in water in the middle of the night freezing. We'd still have all this light flow over. So we had to come to what was that scene going to be. Okay, we're going to put water in the glass house. We have to build for that. Do we still go with the projection screen idea? No, it's going to be daylight, so we can't do that. How am I going to create that effect? So, you know, there's a lot of conversation to arrive at, okay, I want you to put 8 tracks of water tracks like this, turn them up so they dripped 3 drips every 5 seconds because we tested the phantom that's how you get that kind of effect. You know?
Wow, that's so specific, like the specificity in that's incredible.
You have to be because you're dealing with no overtime. You cannot shoot any overtime, so we don't have time to experiment on the day. We have to know it works. And so we did all of that before. So we did work very closely in terms of how are we going to create this effect on the money that we have in the time we have.
And what was the budget of the film again?
2.3.
Yeah, okay. Wow, I mean, just incredible. It looks so much more, you know, and it's just what an incredible collaboration by everyone, because the art design, wardrobe, all that, and then adding in just the complexity that you've explained on getting the one scene. It's just, it's amazing. It really is. And Rach, you too, I mean, your last film was really visually beautiful as well, and your relationship with your DOP.
It was a very fulfilling experience, really. We shot it in a set at Griffith Film School. It's a house that's broken down and old. We had like vines on the walls, dust, to just make it look like it was part of a different world. So that was a challenge in itself. But yeah, obviously there are challenges when it comes to shooting in a set, because it's just like a small room, just like what we've got here basically. So how do we make this look visually interesting from different angles? You know, we've got a bed situation, we've got a window bay situation, a fireplace, so just kind of trying to be creative, working in that space and making it feel like a real lived-in kind of house. So a lot of the money went towards production design.
Yeah.
But yeah, working with Ben, my DOP, Ben Cockgrove, I wouldn't have been able to do the film with anyone else. He also happens to be a close friend of mine. And this was, you know, a personal story for me. I was acting in the film, directing at the same time. So to have that support, not just from him, but from the whole crew, was very important for me to feel like I was in a safe environment, to be vulnerable as well. Yeah.
And so I just want to ask you a question about the Me Too movement. How do you feel that's affected us here in Australia? Do you think that's making changes here? Do you think it's more an over there kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel completely different about being a storyteller in this era than I did even 5 years ago. I don't feel apologetic anymore for bringing a female-centric story to a funding body.
Yeah.
I as a woman, I used to feel slightly like, I know it's kind of other, and it's so bizarre that we're 50% of the population, and yet I always felt like, my little story, about women. And I've even had female, funding body sort of agency people say, female friendship, I don't know who's interested in that. I'm like, you're a woman.
Yes, I'm interested in that.
I don't get it. Like, I know it's not directly related to Me Too, but I feel like there is definitely a new era where I don't feel apologetic anymore. I feel excited about the stories that are being told. It's a funny thing though to talk about this issue, because as soon as you put your hand up and say Me Too, or I've been a victim as a woman, you're sort of labelling yourself as a victim. And maybe that's the first step, and it's a really important step. But I suppose there's a type of feminism that I've been using to kind of explain the second, which walks some fairly provocative lines in terms of all of the Me Too stuff and the way the women react to some of the I suppose, abuse or victimisation that they've had as women, with a sort of layer of bravado and not actually owning it, and in fact reinventing it in some ways in order to cope, which is a survival mechanism. And I think it's about saying, I don't want to be a victim, but I want to be a survivor. And finding sort of finding how do we do that? How do we both feel empowered, but also say, well, I have been a victim. I mean, that's difficult terrain. To walk, and we're going to get it wrong. And I think I'm kind of interested in that as well. I think, for me, my film is about women quite often getting it wrong, very wrong. I mean, they do very wrong stuff in my film. So I kind of am interested in that, but it's really exciting time to be a female filmmaker.
I totally agree. And also it's exciting to be a female actor too, and also a female actor that's past 30, if that makes sense, because I feel like there's more stories that are being told now that are for women that are in my age. And the thing is, I want to watch films that have women that are my age, and I want to hear their stories, because I've had a lot of life. I've, been married and then divorced and gone through all those things, had children, and those are the stories you want to connect with and you want to watch them. And I think, Desperate Housewives and The Good Wife were the kind of the leading parts that created those that, women can be in a certain age range, and actually they can hold a whole series and a film, and it's good and people want to watch it.
Surprise.
Yes, hello.
Isn't it bizarre that we found that sort of some kind of a provocative notion?
And it required a Me Too or something like that to lift the lid on that. And that's what's really sad, because I think about how many really great stories that haven't been told that should be, And coming back to your suggestion about being the victim, I totally understand what you're saying there, and I agree too. But I also, I'm glad it happened, because it's now, it's not going to be, nothing like that's accepted anymore. And that's really great. And that's wonderful for women, to have that sense of safety in their work environment, which they totally should have.
And we're all reassessing our behaviour, and that includes women as well, because we've been so much part of a sort of patriarchal culture, and we're all trained to, think in that way. So, actually you have to actively combat it.
Yeah.
You have to actively fight it. You have to actively seek out, female students in a classroom. You have to actively question, does this character have to be male? Why couldn't it be a woman?
Yeah.
As the centre of the story. And I think that's really exciting, and both men and women, I think, should be challenged to do that, and are being challenged to do that.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it also goes the other side of the fence. It might be smaller, but there are women that have been in power that also step over the line of their sense of power, you know what I mean? So I think sometimes it has gone both ways.
Yeah.
And now everyone's accountable.
Yeah.
And
and Me Too is for men too.
Yeah.
Because obviously
men have had it happen to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not just purely feminine, but I totally understand. Yeah. And do you have an opinion, Priscilla, about it?
She'll have an opinion.
It's interesting when it comes up, like that we have Me Too now, and it feels like, wow, this should have happened back in my mother's generation. In some ways I feel like, we're so unevolved still.
Yes.
That we're actually having to have this conversation now, that we're only doing the Me Too thing now for the film industry. And I go, I'm sure there's plenty of other industries that probably need the same going over if they haven't already done so, but I'm sure there's plenty that haven't.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of feel that this problem is at a much bigger scale, which is about how do women, how do men and women see and value each other in the modern world. And having a daughter, I'm very much questioning that. And how do I get my sons to value their relationships with women in a very equal and respectful, and men and women can come together like this.
Yes, exactly.
Do you know, and hit pinnacles together without all of this patriarchal bullshit gameplay that's been conditioned into us for so long. And I go, how do I undo the conditioning, and how do I stop the social conditioning that happens around my children, so that we come from a place
of equality,
and we can still forge lives together and create together in a way that transcends both of us. But I feel like we're in a really weird and difficult situation where what is the role of women? What is the role of men? How can a man be masculine? How can a woman be feminine? How do you embrace your masculine side as a woman without becoming the man in the relationship? Maybe you don't want to be the man in the relationship. How do you still remain feminine if that's your thing? Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes what we risk by expecting women to be really take on masculine qualities to get where they need to go is they sacrifice some of themselves, and they're just going, you know what, I just want someone to have my back.
Yeah, totally.
I just want, and that's okay. Women should still be able to say, I just want someone to have my back. And I think there's a real struggle with that in this male-female dynamic that we have in modern day. Or a woman can say, okay, that's okay, I'm going to take the more masculine role and you can take the feminine role, and you still have to find that coming together.
Yes.
So I think this struggle that we have that's coming out through the Me Too movement is actually just a reaction to a much, much, much bigger, more complex issue that I think if you can address that in your children and in everyone going forward and come from that area,
the next
we
generation
wouldn't need Me Too movements.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So,
and it comes through, so like you said, it's the generation that we create that comes through that have different relationships.
Yes.
And so that there is never need to have this conversation. Well, with that I should get paid the same amount of money as my male counterpart.
It shouldn't even become a question.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a question.
No.
But right now we have to have it because we're not evolved yet.
Yes.
Yes, so we need to actively, fight it, and because it's not embedded yet deeply in us. It's actually,
and it'll
to
take
change
time.
things. It takes time. That's right. And for me, I've spent 20 years feeling slightly deficient, like I'm not enough of a sort of loud voice and enough of a strong authoritarian leader as a director. I need to be more, and I didn't ever think of it this way, but masculine.
Yeah.
And actually, what's really nice is, I think, actually sensitivity, compassion, kindness, like those more traditionally feminine qualities are really helpful as a director.
Yeah.
The ability to collaborate, be inclusive, like let everyone be part of the process. Actually, instead of apologising and feeling like, oh, I've got to conquer that, because that's letting me down as a director, and use that instead. Go, well, guess what? That's what my version of directing looks like.
Yeah.
It doesn't look loud and in charge. It looks like collaborative and open.
And you want that environment for you to work
Well,
in.
it works for me that way.
Yeah.
Like, that's who I am, and it works for me. So why have I spent 20 years trying to not be that, thinking that won't work? I don't look like a director on set. It's like, what? If it works.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that that's really nice that we're starting to look at things like that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, that the director doesn't have to look like one particular thing.
No, that's great. I think that's wonderful. And, you know, the other thing too that's great about being here in Queensland now in Brisbane is, you know, I think that there's a really good industry that's starting to spring up from here. So what would be next for you guys? What are you writing now or planning, or, you know, I know you can't give it away.
Well, I have about third draft, nearly market ready, what I'd call a nearly market ready draft. So a psychological erotic thriller.
Oh, cool.
And it taps into lots of what we've just been talking about from very much the female perspective. And I'm expecting it to be quite confronting. Because I think there's lots of things that are still off the table in terms of the female experience. You know, in the Dark Ages, women got burned at the stake for being a witch.
Yeah.
So I guess it sort of explores a lot of those witch aspects of being a female, you know, which is kind of like, I think people will find that confronting. It's like, you know, it's all that dark stuff you talk about with your girlfriends that you don't really see on screen yet.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit like, you know, there's all this mythology about what it is to be a mother and what's projected forward about being a mother. And I think there are bastions that are kind of still kept in this puritanical framework that we don't dare not destroy. Well, it's like, I'm about to destroy them.
Yay, can't wait.
And will you be directing it too?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Many times with films, you know, particularly when you're writing, and you're the writer, you know, once it gets handed to the director, it's then the director's vision, and that's kind of where the writer kind of hands over their work. And sometimes that, you know, the written work doesn't end up being the film work, you know, that's on screen. And so when you have the ability to direct and write, you really get to have your vision seen through, you know, whereas if you're a writer on television, I mean, you're the showrunner. You know, the director doesn't change anything. As you said, a line has to go back to the writer, and I think that's really great. And so, are you looking at another feature or wanting to do something different?
Yeah. There's a couple of features that are sort of, you know, in various stages of development. Stephen is writing those.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I really love directing,
Yeah.
and I love being involved in development. The development of the story is you know, crucial, I think, to owning and feeling like you can direct something. It's you're not just the gun for hire that's brought in.
Yeah, of course.
It's, you know, and I think when you shoot something, when you edit something, it's another rewriting process, and you have to have that ownership. So, but yes, there's a couple of films, and I'm just hoping that one of them gets across the line soon, because I don't want to do it again.
And so, and do you yourself? I'm sure you have a feature up your sleeve somewhere there, you know.
Somewhere up the sleeve. I think that will be down the line. My most recent project was a web series, and that is a space that I'm very excited about moving more into. I've got 3 more series that I'm wanting to make within the next 3 years. One very much focused on female stories, a different female director every single episode, different female writer every single episode, different female story every episode, and one that's actually a factual series that I will be the subject in, as well as a friend of mine. So we're hoping to get that off the ground within the next couple of months.
Cool.
But yeah, I think that I will be happy if I'm just directing every day. I want to be directing TV. I want to direct a feature film one day. I did my first commercial recently. I'd love to do more of that. I am just happy to be directing, and, you know, of course with Factory as well, doing the show reels. I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue to be plugged into my instrument as a director, because a lot of the time months can go by between projects, or you spend like a week doing a short or a couple of weeks doing a series, and then that's it, for a while. And it's nice to be able to kind of stay plugged into that and to continue developing my craft. which is something that I want to continue to do for the rest of my life, really, and never stop learning. But yeah, I think a feature one day, for sure. Yeah.
And on that, have you got, I mean, what do you think needs to change as well currently within the Australian market with regards to funding, you know, and making Australian content? Like, that's something that obviously we are fighting for constantly, you know, about making Australian content, telling Australian stories, getting it on screens. In an ideal world, what would you like to see change?
I've already seen changes that I really love from Screen Queensland and then the kind of new era. They're really incredible. And, you know, going back to supporting short filmmakers as well, which was something that was sort of missing for a while, because it's such an important stepping stone that we all still need, and yet that sort of funding disappeared for a long time. And, you know, as an educator as well, I see students come out of, you know, their undergraduate degrees with nowhere to go. So that's really exciting, but also the money that Screen Queensland are putting into developing local content with local filmmakers is obviously crucial. I mean, for me, I think giving the filmmakers that have proven themselves with great shorts, give them some license. I think sometimes development processes can be destructive. I've had really, really positive development processes as well, but I think if we want extraordinary voices on our screens, we need to support the idiosyncratic, the unique. Yeah. Because we can't compete budget-wise with Hollywood, so we should stop trying. We should be developing really creative visions, unique visions.
And also putting some, you know, putting our dollar behind our stories, if that makes sense, with regards to getting them out there, letting the Australian people know that they can go watch these films in cinema. And that's right. What's really lacking is that we get a lot of money put on there, hey, there's another, you know, superhero thing out there. And that's fine, and they're very entertaining, but there's no license to allow for smaller independent filmmakers to get their story out there that probably Australian people will want to watch.
I think we would actually.
I think
we're interested in the bolder visions. I think we're interested in, you know, new ways of looking at Australian culture and looking at particular little pockets that we might not have encountered in our life. But that's what I love in cinema. You know, so of course I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that mainstream Australian audiences want more of that too.
I believe that. I really do, and I think that's why a lot of people also tend to go to streaming platforms because they do get to see that content, and we see the successful shows, the Harrow, the Family Law, and they've done really well. You know why? Because Australia goes, I want to watch this. So why not make films that they go, well, this has done 6 episodes of an hour. That's 6 hours of storytelling. Why not put it on a big screen? Because they're watching it and they're getting the numbers on television. You know, so it's interesting.
It is, and I think, you know, it's interesting too that television is almost where the more sort of controversial, difficult, you know, subject matter is being explored. It's sort of allowed to be, and it's funny because it should really. Traditionally, it's been the opposite, that cinema's been where the risks are taken. Yeah. But look, I mean, I was lucky. I didn't have anyone look over my shoulder. I felt absolutely liberated to make the film that
you wanted to make.
That I wanted to make. Yeah, it wasn't, but it was also $1 million movie.
But it's a brilliant $1 million movie, you know.
Thank you. But you know, it's not a lot of money. There's still a lot at stake. $1 million is $1 million, but it wasn't a $4 million film, or you know, which might have had more sort of pressure to think about the commerciality, or anyway.
But I think it's still very much it's an incredible skill to be able to go, right, this is the budget I have, and I have $1 million, and to make that $1 million go so much further and I think it's such a great foundation for a director as they move up. So when you get a $10 million film, you're going to be really smart about going, right, we got $10 million, but can we make it look 20? And you probably you can.
I think all Australian filmmakers can. I think that's what we do really well.
Totally.
You know, we never have big budgets ever. You know.
And you don't get handed to you. I mean, I think we here in Australia we work our butts off to get our films made, and when they're made, we really stretch that dollar to look extraordinary. I mean, how do you feel about the funding?
Well, I think, you know, when Australia had perhaps its most boldest screen stories, it was probably in the 70s when we had the benefit of 10BA, and I think what that really was about, and that's where a lot of our iconic screen voices actually came from and were nurtured in. And I think there's a few things. So first of all, high creativity is about risk-taking. Bold films, bold visions, bold voices. Nurturing bold voices is about allowing an environment of risk-taking, which is what Mairi's talking about. So to do that, and I think Seth McKenna said, you know, in America, filmmakers get the chance to fail more often. In Australia, you don't get that chance to take a risk and fail. So there's so much pressure to like not fail on the second film or whatever it is, that failure and risk taking has to be part of the process to come up with bold and original voices and stories. And I'm not just talking cinema, I'm talking across all screens.
Yeah.
And whatever initiatives or funding models can support more risk taking in that way and more kind of chances for more people to fail and then get up and do it again is probably what needs to happen. And then the reverse end of that is the whole marketing.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get our voices known and heard and let people know simply where you can see it and where it's on long enough for people to get to it in time. So whether that's streaming, how do I find that amongst the glut of content we have online? How do I find it? Or whether that's cinema, like how can you keep it on the screen for long enough until you can get your marketing out there? So I think we have two sides. At the front end in the development, and we have this back end marketing distribution problem. I think if you can address those two things, then we're on the money.
For me, as an emerging filmmaker as well, and someone who is hoping to make a feature film one day, it's awesome to see films like The Second and The Butterfly Tree. You know, I can see it's possible to make an awesome film for $1 million. Like, why couldn't I do that one day? You know, so I think that being the first domino to fall is important, because we pave the way for the filmmakers who are going to follow, especially female filmmakers. Even to just be sitting around, you know, a couch with strong female filmmakers and an actor is awesome, and there needs to be more of it. So yeah.
I think the more we talk and the more we offer and give the industry access to our experiences, the more that, you know, they can get educated and understand the process too. So I want to ask you, if there was one piece of advice you could give any like budding, emerging director out there, what would it be?
It's about digging into the driving force behind what it is you want to say, about what's your take on the world, what are the stories that really excite you, and stick to that. I think, you know, for me, I'm always going down a bad rabbit hole when I'm comparing myself to others and thinking I've got to be more like that, or even the opposite of that, which is what we do sometimes because it is so hard. It is so hard to stay believing in yourself. And so sometimes ego gets in the mix and goes, oh, you know, but I'm better than that person. Why, you know, they got that opportunity and I didn't. That's really dangerous and ugly as well. It's like, so just don't compare yourself. Just dig into what really excites you and moves you, and you know, what do you want to see on the screen, and pursue that, and try and not let that get watered down through the process, the very difficult process of raising money.
And staying truthful to yourself, I think, is really important.
Well, that's right.
Because as actors have, as you were talking about earlier, they have a certain essence that you find and you see on screen. At the studio, we always, you know, try and advocate for someone to know that many people will come in who are your castability, but only you have your essence, and that's what gets you, you know, cast. And a director is the same. It's like there's a certain style to your storytelling and your vision and your voice, and it's through. And then to stay true to that, and that sounds like what you're saying here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, and then going through the whole process too of being reviewed or critiqued by both the public and critics.
Because you've just gone through
We've
that
gone through that, but it's like, okay, well, you know, really? One person, you know, thinks it's fantastic, the other person thinks it's terrible. That doesn't matter. Obviously, it's really important, you know, the role of critics and commentators on our work. But you've got to stay sort of separate from it. I mean, you talked about the film as like the baby, and Rachel Blake told me recently about how Ray Lawrence describes the process of taking your baby out into the world as it's a baby when you sort of finish the creative process. You know, the last day of the sound mix, for example, it's a newborn baby, and then it starts to, you know, interact out in the world. Has a little festival screening, but it comes back to mummy, and it's a teenager. And then there's that point where it's on screens for all to see. You know, in my case, Stan. So, and then it's an adult, and you never see it again. And I thought that was such a good way to describe the process. And I think because I'm feeling almost like I'm just at that point of separating myself from it now and letting it belong to other people. But yeah, in the development process and while you're making it, you've got to please yourself. You have to, otherwise, why are you doing it?
If you're always making the kind of stuff you want to be making, then comparing yourself to something else is so counterproductive. You know, I'm in my 20s, I know a lot of other female directors and filmmakers and directors in the same space as me, and I think that two of the most common things are self-comparison to others, as well as this feeling of not doing what you love every single day. You know, there are a lot of filmmakers who are working in retail or working at production companies as coordinators when they want to be directors.
Yeah.
I think that the more conversation that comes around people who are kicking goals and celebrating the small wins as well will break people out of that and give us permission to be like, you know what, it's okay. It's okay that I'm not doing what I love every day. It's okay, it's part of the process. Yeah.
And yourself?
Oh, I just think it's a really hard question, that one, in terms of I'm halfway through my life and I'm very conscious that life is incredibly short.
Yeah.
And I'm very conscious of the fact that life is complex and you have to juggle many different aspects to have a connected whole life, like relationships with your friends, with your peers, with your family, with your children, you know, making enough money to survive, or making whatever your ambition is, fulfilling that. And if that's creativity in the filmmaking process, how do you protect your space amongst all of the rest that makes you a full, rich, embodied person that's making the most of this very short amount of time we have on Earth? You know, and how do you kind of align time to serve all of those different aspects of what's going to make you, when you get to the end of your life and say, I regret nothing.
Yes.
I regret nothing. Because that's what you want. You want to go, I regret nothing, I just wish I had more.
Yeah.
And if I want to get to that edge when I'm on my deathbed, then there's a lot you have to kind of factor in, and you have to kind of be true to all those aspects of who you are, plus nurture that creative space within you, or that voice. So I don't think there's any one easy answer to say it's just this. But what I would say is that honour your creative self, find ways to nurture that, find ways to protect that space, but don't do it to the detriment of all those other aspects that make you a fully connected whole person in terms of your relationships with a myriad of other people and other experiences.
Yeah. No, and that's, I agree. What allows us to tell those stories is the life we live, or the life we've lived, or the life we've been a part of, or whether it be a story that your best friend had something happen and you draw from that. So I think those aspects have to be a part of your creative process, because it's what we draw on to tell our stories. So it's finding that balance, you know, and saying it's okay today if I don't do something for my creativity, but I'm doing it in another way where I'm experiencing joy in my children's life. Because that's creative in its own way, right?
I see a lot of people that if they compartmentalise their life into only 2 boxes, and one of those boxes falls over at some point, they really struggle. Do you know, like if you only allow 2 aspects of your life to become you, and one of them fails and you're just reliant on the one thing, it's a pretty fragile position to find yourself in. It's like saying, I define myself by only these 2 aspects of my life. That's crazy. I think as women, your strong point is you get to define yourself by many aspects about who you are to different people and what relationships you have. And so I am always a bit wary about giving young female filmmakers one word of advice of what you have to do. I wish I had learnt to value the time I have on this earth more at a younger age, and not be afraid to maybe not live in so much fear of having a go, like really pushing yourself outside your comfort zone more often. That would be my thing.
Okay guys, well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming here and spending some time with us today. It's been really great to chat with you. And for you guys out there, you can watch the second, it's on Stan now. And The Butterfly Tree is available on iTunes. You can also see 2 weeks, which will be available on YouTube, which Rachel was directing. As well, head to her website, rachelmaxine.com, to see any of her films. That's it from the Factory Access. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Angela.
Cool, thanks.